Hey everyone, welcome to Sidetrack Adventures. This is Steve. Right now we're in the desert in Southeastern California, at what remains of the old wooden plank road, which was one of the first roads through this area. Today, we're going to be heading to the southeast corner of California, but before we get there, I wanted to visit a place where a town once stood that was instrumental in building this plank road, and despite everything that was thrown at this town, for a while at least, this town just would not die. We are currently about 12 miles from the southeast corner of California and the Arizona state line, in the middle of the Algodones Dunes. Because the transcontinental railroads bypassed San Diego and went straight to Los Angeles, San Diego leaders decided they would try to make the city the hub of Southern California's road network. And to do that, they needed a road coming from the east so that Los Angeles could be completely bypassed. The only problem was the immense sand dunes in this area that made travel across here incredibly tough. Their solution to the problem of these dunes was a road made out of wooden planks to be built across them. The initial plank road was built in 1915 in only 2 months. The total length of the plank road was 6.5 miles. For the next 11 years, work crews constantly struggled to maintain the road, fighting the elements as sand would bury it often. But from 1915 to 1926, the plank road was the main road traveling across the desert here between Yuma, Arizona and San Diego, California. This road is pretty narrow, so they had to have turnouts every 1,000 feet so cars could pass each other. Most of the old plank road is gone now. This section here was recreated in the 1970s using original fragments of the road that were found along its path. There's also this kiosk here with some background information on the plank road and some pretty cool historic photos. We could kind of take a look at them here. But it's this picture here of the road being assembled that brings us to where we're heading next, where the town of Ogilby once stood. Here are the modern roads going through the desert. That's Interstate 8 on the far left. Driving through this area, it's pretty clear why it was so hard to travel through here. While the Spanish had first reached California in the early 1500s, their first expedition through here wasn't until 1774, a year after the Boston Tea Party in the East. The dunes where we started are now way off in the distance, and here we are on Ogilby's main street. As you can see, there isn't much left, but it's not completely gone. This is about where the train station once stood. I'll put up a historic photo, but let's take a look around and see if there's anything left of it. Ogilby was founded by the Southern Pacific Railroad in 1877. It started as a small railroad siding, and there are a few pieces of wood on the ground here and there. But when Ogilby was founded, they had a cistern, a section house, tool house, cookhouse, and a bunkhouse. All of the inhabitants were railroad employees, consisting of Chinese immigrants who were hired to construct the railroad, and section workers who maintained it. The railroad would put sidings every so many miles for train maintenance, but this was a pretty minor one. There was no water at all in this area. All the water would have to be imported from Yuma, Arizona. This area didn't see much action, and there wasn't much here, and it would have likely quickly disappeared as railroad technology improved. But in the late 1880s, gold was discovered nearby. Quickly, this place boomed. By 1895, Ogilby added a post office, an express office, a grocery store, a school teacher's house, and a freight house with 2 water closets. Most of the town was on the other side of the tracks, but I did want to look around on this side just to see what was over here. So far, it doesn't look like much of anything, but I do see up ahead of us a few poles, and I believe that is where the ramp to load the trains would have been. Because of the gold rush, the town grew so fast they had to turn railroad car bodies into the buildings. Several other towns popped up in the area because of the lure of gold, including Glamis, Obregon, Hedges, and Tumco. But gold rushes tend to end as quickly as they come, and those towns started to die and their post offices closed. Ogilby became the center of life for these mining towns, having the only post office that stayed open. And it looks like these posts and what's left of the ramp is the only evidence left that there was a station once here. Despite the post office staying open, the population dropped pretty quickly here as well. There were only about 8 residents in 1907. The town was quickly fading away, but then it got a boost as San Diego was going to host the 1915 Panama, California Exposition and wanted that road across the desert done in time for the expo. To build the plank road, the parts were shipped here to Ogilby, likely offloaded at this very ramp. Then the segments were put together at a fabrication plant here, before being taken by mules out to the dunes. There's not much left where the station once was, but it looks like this large chunk of concrete was left behind. We've moved back over to the other side of the tracks to where the main street in Ogilby was, and there are a few things over here it looks like. The constant need to keep repairing the plank road kept the town's economy going for a while. What started as a railroad town, then became a mining town, was now in the wooden road business. I'm not sure what this is that we're coming up to now. I believe this was where the Ogilby School was, which was a one-room schoolhouse, but I'm not 100% certain on that yet. While the plank road was a boost to Ogilvy's economy, that only lasted until a new permanent road was built through the desert. That road opened in 1926, and there was no longer a need to assemble pieces of the plank road. Ogilby was then saved by the Great Depression of all things. With so many people out of jobs and having hard times, quite a few decided to take their chances looking for gold. That led to people heading back out here, and enough came that a second store even opened here. I noticed a date on the steps over here, and also the initials JC, but it says 1116, and the last digit's missing, but I believe this is 1937, which pretty much confirms that it's the schoolhouse, because I know the schoolhouse was built in 1937. There's another foundation here. I'm not quite sure what this would have been. There are maps for the town, but they all predate the time that these foundations would have been put in. There are a few blocks over here. Most of the buildings in town burned down over time. In fact, in 1932, there was a massive fire that burned down the train station, and they never bothered to rebuild it. The trains still come through here, they just haven't stopped in quite some time. Here's another foundation. The town got a final boost with the onset of World War II. With so many soldiers coming through the area because of the Desert Training Center, it was able to hold on a bit longer. And there is an inscription on this foundation. Let's take a look. Looks like a date. 1940. It looks like the town dump is over here, or at least a dump. But as you can see from that last foundation, they were still building here into the 1940s. But the resurgence because of World War II was also short-lived, And in 1946, the school closed, and the trains no longer stopped here. By 1961, the town was completely abandoned, and most of the buildings had burned down. But while the town was abandoned, not everyone left. And right over here is the Ogilby Cemetery. There used to be a sign for it where those two poles are, but it's gone. All of the graves here in the cemetery are unmarked, and supposedly most, if not all of the people buried here, were Chinese immigrants who died working on the railroad. There are quite a few graves out here, which goes to show you how dangerous railroad work was in the 1800s, and how disposable the Chinese immigrants were considered by the railroad as well. Some people have also created some makeshift newer memorials out here. It looks like here's another newer memorial. Yeah, 2007. I think we've seen all that's left of Ogilby. So now we're going to head a few miles to the southeast and try and visit the southeast corner of California. There's the crossing to Mexico, and we're only a few thousand feet from the southeast corner of California. This is the Alamo Canal. This canal is what created the Salton Sea. I did a whole video on that previously, but I'll give a quick and dirty version of what happened as we crossed the Hanlon heading in front of us to get to the corner. Hanlon heading was opened in 1906 to help control water through the Alamo Canal, but the canal had already been breached south of here, and pretty much the entire Colorado River was diverted into the canal. We're going to cross Hanlon heading here and walk over to the border, which will only be about 2,000 feet or so. And this thing's been up for over 115 years, so hopefully it'll last another day. So this canal was created to bring water to the Imperial Valley. It went south into Mexico and then went west to get around the dunes. But this canal would fill with silt, and that was creating water shortages in the Imperial Valley. This big counterweight for the heading is still here after all these years. These chains have held up. So because not enough water was flowing through here, the California Development Company decided they would create a new breach in the Colorado River 4 miles south of here in Mexico without the permission of Mexican authorities or without building any headgates to control the water. And eventually the entire Colorado River began emptying into the Alamo Canal. All this water made it to the Imperial Valley, which has one of the lowest elevations in the United States. And once it got there, it had nowhere to go, and the Salton Sea was formed. So while Hanlon heading did open in 1906, it was pretty much useless until 1907 when the breach south of here was finally closed, and they were able to shut off all that water pouring into the Imperial Valley. Of course, the Colorado River in this area isn't what it once was, as we'll see when we get closer to it. But there's the border wall in front of us, and right over there is the southeast corner of California. We've reached the Colorado River. Well, the Colorado River is down there, somewhere in front of us. We can't quite see it. Historically, we would be standing on the banks of the Colorado River right now. And there's the southeast corner of California where the wall ends, and the wall on the other side is in Arizona. So this is what the southeast corner of California looks like. As you can see, tire tracks everywhere. This area is heavily patrolled by Border Patrol. And I'm surprised we haven't actually come across Border Patrol yet. I guarantee they've seen us. And it actually looks like there's a Border Patrol vehicle on the other side of the river in Arizona. So we're definitely being watched right now. I don't know how well it comes out on camera, but there are actually 2 walls here. So we're going to be about 10, 20 feet or so from the corner of California. There's no way for us to access the interior of the walls, or no way without us getting in trouble at least. But we'll get as close as we can. And the actual corner of California, the border, is in the middle of the Colorado River, so we're going to get as close as we can on land. And you might notice the little gates at the bottom of the wall. I believe those are in case there's any flooding, they can open those up so debris can get through. So looking through the fence, you can see the actual southeast corner of California and the Colorado River. So the technical southeast corner of California is right out there in the middle of the Colorado River, as well as the northernmost point in Mexico, and the Arizona state line is in the middle of the river as well. So multiple Border Patrol vehicles had just shown up. They were very friendly and professional, but pretty confused as to what we're doing. Once we explained, they were okay with it and let us do our thing, but we're going to hurry and get out of here. But this is what the southeast corner of California looks like. So that's our look at the southeast corner of California and the town of Ogilby. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing, and we'll see you next week.